Well, Wikileaks founder Julian Assange was granted bail earlier today in a London courtroom, but the 39-year-old Australian won't be getting out of jail just yet. Swedish authorities have announced they will appeal the judge's decision, and they want Assange extradited over allegations related to a sex crimes investigation. Now, this appeal that they've announced means Assange will remain behind bars at least for the next couple of days. Jennifer Robinson is one of his lawyers, and she joins me now from London. Jennifer, first of all, what was your client's reaction, Julian Assange's reaction, when he found out that the Swedish justice system was going to appeal his bail and he wasn't getting out?
Well, of course he was disappointed but not altogether surprised. He felt that his confidence in the British justice system was justified today with Senior District Judge Riddle's decision to grant bail. But unfortunately, the Swedish prosecuting authorities disagree, and they want to see him kept in solitary confinement for a crime he did not commit, and indeed for a crime for which he has not even been charged.
Okay. What's the crime here? I mean, we hear that it's sexual assault allegations by two women. What do you think is going on? Of course, the allegations are completely false, and indeed they do not meet the charges. There are 4 charges, one of unlawful coercion, 2 of sexual molestation, and 1 of rape. We had his Swedish counsel here in London today, and he has explained to us that the facts involved simply do not amount to a crime in his view, and that Mr. Assange is not only innocent, but of course he would not be convicted if returned to Sweden. Even if he were returned to Sweden and convicted, he wouldn't be facing a custodial sentence. So it's highly irregular and indeed outrageous that our client now sits in a prison in southwest London in solitary confinement for something he hasn't done, he hasn't been charged with, and even if he were to be returned and convicted, he wouldn't spend time in prison. Okay, who said this today?
His Swedish counsel, Mr. Hurtig.
His Swedish counsel, okay, acting on his behalf.
Exactly.
So what do you think is really going on here?
We simply don't know, but obviously the whole case has been highly irregular. The allegations are false, they were leaked to the press, doing a huge amount of damage to Mr. Assange. Following on from that, he remained in Sweden and offered voluntary cooperation with the police to clear his name of what he sees as incredibly damaging allegations. He sought the specific permission of the prosecutor to leave the country. She granted that. Since being here in London, we have offered voluntary cooperation to answer her questions. She has rejected that on every occasion and sought an arrest warrant. He's now sitting in prison in solitary confinement because of that arrest warrant. He is willing to cooperate, so we simply don't know what's going on behind it.
All right. Now, some people have suggested that this is the screws tightening because of what he's done, leaking all the information related to the war in Afghanistan, leaking all that information related to the diplomatic cables, in particular those going back and forth between various countries and the United States. What I don't get about that theory, though, is what have the Swedes got to do with anything? I mean, what axe would they have to grind with his leaking a ton of information? Why would they care?
Well, as we've seen from the cables that have been released by Wikileaks in the last few weeks, it's become clear that there's a far greater cooperation, intelligence cooperation, between the US and Sweden, and indeed in cooperation that was previously kept from Swedish Parliament and the Swedish public. So I think that there is a far greater sense of cooperation between those two states, and we're seeing that from the Wikileaks cables. As to whether that has any connection at all with this particular case, we simply don't know. There's also a suggestion that there are some domestic politics around sexual offence law reform going on. The lawyer for the 2 complainants who in fact sought to reinstitute proceedings when the investigation was dropped by a chief prosecutor in Sweden, he did that around the time of his own election and is a member of Parliament and a member of a party who is very strongly in favour of sexual offence law. So this case certainly came at an opportune time for him.
Okay. On the first point, if the US wants him, why don't they charge him with something? Or are they going to?
Several very high-profile US public officials have been making numerous claims, and indeed they've instigated an investigation, I understand, in the US. But we haven't seen one sensible explanation of which provisions of law they would rely upon. It is our position that Mr. Assange, as editor-in-chief of Wikileaks, a media organisation, is entitled to the First Amendment protections, as are all editors of media organisations in the US.
and any prosecution, especially under the Espionage Act, would be unconstitutional. So while there has been a lot of political bluster and bellicose statements coming from public officials, we don't see grounds for prosecution, and we don't expect that it will be forthcoming.
Oh, you don't think they plan on indicting your client under the Espionage Act?
Perhaps they plan to, but we don't believe they have grounds to do so.
All right. Yeah, two different things there. All right. Well, we'll look. Okay. We'll leave it there for now. Julian Assange's lawyer, Jennifer Robinson, thank you for speaking to me from London.
You're welcome.